I care to say. Let's just say several decades.
Growing up?
No, actually, I didn't. I came to it fairly late. I got interested in it early in my college years. And my mother actually was an author. She published a book when she was in her early 20s. And I don't know if that's why I never thought of becoming an author. I really don't know. But, once the bug bit me, that was it.
That's
I
interesting.
knew, I knew that
So
that
your
was what I wanted to do.
so your mom published when she was younger in an era where publishing meant actually sending a manuscript to a publisher and having them assess you and then paying you money as opposed to the way it is now.
Well, yes, she did. And actually, so did I, because my first book was published in, I think, 1982. So I've been, sitting on the front lines of the incredible change that has just completely transformed the publishing industry and opened up so many new avenues for writers.
So you've gone both ways then. You're a traditionally published author and an independent published author, or have you maintained yourself as a traditionally published author throughout your entire career?
As yet, I am only traditionally published, but I'm getting ready to bring some of my backlist books back into print. So I'm going to be indie publishing those.
That's interesting. So how do you feel about the indie publishing world right now?
I think it's great. It's amazing opportunities and options for authors. I mean, it's become a viable alternative career path. Great for people like me who want to keep their older books still in circulation. Because it's so popular, though, it's also fraught with danger. And there's a lot of scams and worthless services and people who are just looking to make money. And many writers don't really study up on publishing in the industry before they kind of jump into it. So it's a lot easier to get in trouble if you don't prepare yourself by knowing something about the field first.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting way to look at it because it's hard to know about the field before you get into it because you're not really sure where the pitfalls are. In my opinion, anyway, it's really difficult to kind of navigate in a dark room. Once you start stepping, you realize what painful things are out there, but not until then, really. I mean, how would you recommend somebody do the research before getting started?
Well, I think that any writer who's interested in publishing should understand not just the indie publishing world, but the traditional publishing world, because they're both viable options. And in order to make an informed choice as to which one suits you best, you really need to know something about those fields. And also if you know how things should work, it's easier to figure it out when you encounter a person or a company that wants to rip off or take advantage of you. So,
How
there are books that you get. There's a wealth of information. There's publishing experts like on the self-publishing page of the Writer Beware website, I have a whole list of links to people like David Gowron, who is very, very knowledgeable, and there are a whole bunch of others. And so it really is possible. I mean, until you venture forth, you're right. It is like stumbling in a dark room. But there are resources that you can use to prepare yourself and to figure out how it should work, and get a sense of best practices. So that when you, for instance, when you get solicited by some rip-off assisted self-publishing company, you get a phone call or an email out of the blue, you can look at it and say, no, that's not the way things should work. I need to make a better choice.
Mm-hmm. Back in the day, they used to be called vanity presses, right?
Yes, yes. And there's sort of kind of halfway between the old-fashioned vanity press and real, true indie publishing. But there are a lot of them out there that are real rip-offs. I'm actually working on a blog post right now, which is going to identify some of the worst offenders.
So, where can you name a few of the books that you would recommend that authors who are new into the arena would want to pick up before even stepping away from their manuscript and trying to get published or trying to make some money or try to sell it on their own?
I'm not a big fan of how to write books. I think the best thing, and as for how to get published books, there are many, many choices, and which one works for you, I think it depends a lot on your personality. So what I usually suggest is that people go to like a big bookstore like Barnes and Noble and just go to the area where books on writing are shelved and just look through what's there, and you can usually find something that will work for you. The dummies guides, I mean, I hate
No, I
what
love
they're
those.
called.
Yeah, they're great books, though, aren't they? They're really good in terms of information, and the way they lay it out is just wonderful.
Yeah, they're excellent, and they do, their books. They have books on traditional publishing, books on indie publishing. They break it down by genre. I mean, if you're a children's author, it's a very different market from the adult fiction market. So, there's a lot of choice out there.
What I think a lot of people do, and you write a novel and you finish the book, and then you realize that you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there trying to sell their book too and get eyes on their words. You send query letters out to agents, and maybe you get results, maybe you don't. A lot of the scams that I see come from the marketing arena. When you decided to go ahead and do your independent publishing or something like that, you say, I'm just going to put this on Amazon. And then you start seeing how to work Twitter, how to work Facebook, how to get your marketing and stuff like that going. I don't know, because it sounds really good, right? People are making tens, thousands of followers. I think that's where the scams are really getting people.
I think you're absolutely right, that marketing services are the real growth industry with scams. And there's like the author solutions companies, Ex Libris, Author House, Trafford, and so on. They all offer marketing services which are either overpriced, worthless, or both. They're just a complete waste of writers' money, but they sound good because they promise exposure and access and audience. But they really don't deliver. For instance, press releases. People think that press releases are a great book promotional strategy, and a lot of these marketing services sell either press release blast or email blast, but nobody pays attention to press releases. There are just so many of them, especially if they're not, even targeted to, say, newspapers or magazines, but just posted on one of the online PR sites. And some, these companies charge a premium for something like that, and it is completely worthless.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's scary too, because I mean, you do have a sense of, I've got to get this novel under people's eyes. How do I do it? And you get duped into thinking like there's an easy path towards that end. I mean, I guess
Yep.
I'm somebody who's been in traditionally published. You've been traditionally published, and now you're looking for the indie publishing. I mean, do you see a route that should be taken, or is it more or less you just keep pounding away because you like the art?
There, it's hard to quantify. I mean, I personally hate the marketing aspect of it.
Oh
Some
yeah, me
people
too.
love it. Some people love the promo, going to conferences. I hate all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you do kind of have to do it. The difference is if you were traditionally published with a publisher that puts some resources into marketing, and not all publishers do. The publisher will do a lot for you before the book is ever released.
A lot
And
of publishers nowadays aren't even doing any marketing for you to begin with. It seems almost like even agents want you to have somewhat of a following before they'll even take you on as a client, which is kind of like that.
that's truer in the nonfiction world, the fiction world. For fiction, necessarily going to be interested. I mean, I have a big following online for my writer beware work. And these are people who could not be less interested in me as an author. So on paper, I might look at like someone with a very high social media profile, but in terms of marketing me as an author, it's not useful at all. So I think
Because
agents are more.
you've gone in a certain direction with your following. People know you as the writer beware writer. They don't know you as,
Right.
Victoria Strauss fantasy writer or romance writer.
Right, exactly. And I think, I think that when you're a fiction author, your following is less important. For nonfiction, it's more important because it's more directly relevant to what you're writing. For instance, if I were to write a book on literary scams, my following would be very relevant. But my most recent YA novel, it was completely non-relevant.
Unrelevant,
But
yeah.
I think, publishers and agents, especially smaller publishers, will certainly take a risk on someone with no profile and no social media following. So it's certainly not a prerequisite to making it. I think a lot of people think that it is, but it really isn't.
Yeah, I've heard the rumor that it's very important, but I'm listening to you speak, and it goes along with my other opinion that you've got to exercise those writing muscles more than anything else. I mean, you market why that doesn't matter too much if you're not being able to write a coherent sentence or you're not entertaining enough for an audience to engage with.
Exactly. That's exactly right. If you're a writer, you've got to write. That's the most important thing. And one of the biggest changes in the publishing industry during the time that I've been in it is the requirement for self-marketing. I mean, it's really not even an option now. You have to be willing to get out there and promote your book in whatever way is most comfortable to you. And when I first started publishing, it was even considered a little bit tacky to get out there and promote yourself. But now you kind of have to do it. It's definitely part of the process.
It's uncomfortable, absolutely. Not to say I'm traditionally published or anything. I don't like talking about that. Buy my book, look at my book, read my stuff. The
I
opportunity,
know.
I just hate it. It's so uncomfortable. I like shiver with the idea. People love it. They like write a piece of fiction and they will seek to get it out there in that way, and they will talk about it endlessly. I'm like, man, how do you do that? It's like a
Yeah,
certain sense of
I'm with
bravado.
you. I'm with you. But there are promotional methods that work for every kind of writer. So you just, instead of trying to do everything or things that you're not comfortable with, you need to look around for things that you are comfortable with. Writing articles or approaching book bloggers for reviews, and there's plenty of stuff that introverts can do.
A podcast.
A podcast, yeah, an interview, yes, yes, where I'm invisible except for my voice.
Exactly. And I love it. I can do whatever I want. I'm sitting here doodling and nobody's yelling at me to pay attention. So it's fascinating. So, I mean, where I discovered you, there's a publisher that will take you on. They'll call it a writing contest. They will, they'll say, join the writing contest with your novel, and if you win, we'll take 50% of your royalties, and you get the other half or whatever. But it doesn't work out according to the blog post that I read of yours. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I can guess. Do you not want to say who they are online?
You would rather not say it? Okay, that's fine.
I have no problem saying it. I wonder if you maybe would
Oh no,
rather
I
not.
just don't remember what it was. My memory is horrible.
It might have been Inkit.
Yep, Inkit. That's what it is. Inkit. Yeah, I know people who've gone through Inkit, and they get very excited about, they're being a published author, and they count themselves as being a published author, but then they have no control over anything. Like their cover art's being totally destroyed, and they have no choice with the artist they get. You're stuck with this cover, and now go out and try to sell your work or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's part of the traditional publishing process. I mean, if you're going to publish with a publisher as opposed to doing it yourself, yeah, that's what you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to deal with editors. You may not have input into cover art. You may be marketed in ways of the publisher's choice rather than your own. It goes with the territory. And one of the things that indie authors love is the full control of the process. But there's also something to be said for having a publisher partner to help you and do it for you, assuming that your publisher is competent, which is not always the case. But Inkit, with the problem with Inkit is that it uses a contest. It uses the temptation of a publishing contract to kind of boost its membership. It's looking to increase its membership and have more members of its community. And there are also, in my opinion, issues with its contract. So, and it's also an incredible spammer. It spams like mad. And it has a referral program where it pays people to refer authors to its contests. So it's kind of underhanded. It's a little underhanded.
And they're in your face too. And you've just written something. I mean, that's the hardest part, is that you do want to show off your writing and you want to get it out there. And when you see something like Inkit and they're promising you the world for, I don't know, they're promising everybody the same thing, obviously. They can't do it for everybody. They're not promising you it's going to get published by Tor, but they'll offer it to Tor or something along those lines, if I understand it correctly. It's an odd world.
Yeah, that's just why you need to be informed and research any publisher you approach. I mean, if you were interested in Inkin and you did a little Google search, you'd find my blog post.
Yeah, that's how I found it right away. It was like the first thing I read was the relationship between them and the bad side of indie publishing. I mean, yeah, email, if you're going to get spammed, if you're going to see this thing over and over again, got to look into it. I was looking at your Writer Beware blog site, and basically what you do is you do research. I mean, you look at who's writing the emails, you send out the, you dig a little bit, and you're like, okay, you could trust this if you want. And one of the things, one of the articles I was reading was the library scam, where you're going to pay
Mhm.
$35 and the person's going to get your library, your book in the library or something along those lines. And it's like, huh, why would I want to pay you $35 to get my book in the library? Couldn't I just,
Well, not to mention, you could never verify that they'd actually done it. I mean,
unless you,
even and if they did do it, it wouldn't get on the shelves. It'd probably be put in their book sale, in the library's book sale. It's just, yeah, that was one of the more bizarre ones that I've seen recently.
the interesting thing was they also had something about a diamond that they were trying to give away too, and there was a rock, it was a piece of
Yeah,
rock
yeah,
salt.
like that's
Like,
a
oh my,
diamond, sure. Uh-huh.
that's the worst thing. There are desperate people out there, people desperate for money,
Yep.
desperate to rip you off for whatever you have, and it's just sad world that
Yes.
we live in, unfortunately.
And
Um,
equally, there are people, there are authors who are desperate for a chance and desperate for exposure.
yeah, that's the
And,
sad thing, isn't it? They are, we are.
and
I want people to read my art. I want people to look at me and say, this was so entertaining. So, I think my baby is capable of getting that. So I want to put it underneath the eyes to get those kind of results. I mean, I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people out there that do the exact same thing. Um,
mhm.
and it's just, the slush pile of indie writers. It just seems, how do you get that leg up? What's the most ridiculous scam you've seen perpetrated against
Ever,
independent writer
ever.
ever? Yeah.
Um, Probably the literary agent who faked her own death in order to get out from under all her dissatisfied clients,
Oh my
and then
God.
turned up with a new scam in Canada. But she was so clumsy that they actually went online and found something on Writer Beware, and they were able to identify her. Um,
My
so
God. So she walked away from her life to get away from
she
the clients that she had set up for publishing, or promises that
Well,
she
it's
made.
even
Couldn't.
weirder because she was actually wanted by the police in her home state for assaulting her mother with a car. And she jumped bail, went to North Carolina, set up this literary agency, got a lot of clients, didn't sell any books, of course. Then she set up a writing conference, and she took a lot of money and didn't put the conference on and faked her own death so that she could take the money and run. And then she turned up in Canada with the exact same scheme. So she was arrested by the Mounties, and she pretended to be crazy, which she wasn't. And then she was eventually extradited back to the United States. But this was a long, drawn out saga. I think that's probably the weirdest.
Well, and it's pretty scary too. This is obviously somebody violent who's willing to lie to how many people? Hundreds, thousands? I mean, how many people does she wrap up in this scam? It's,
No, probably close to 100 or maybe more. I don't remember exactly. This was a long time ago. Um, but I should say that literary agent scams, they used to be the most common kind of scam. Agents that charged fees or ran editing services where the agency was just a front for charging you $2,000 to edit your manuscript.
mhm.
But that's another good thing about the rise of indie publishing is that the literary agent is no longer, the ultimate gatekeeper to getting published. And
Yeah, that's a
it's a
thought that I've
lot.
been having lately, that you could possibly skip over the agent entirely and go right to the
Yeah,
publishers.
absolutely. And there are so many small presses that work directly with authors. I mean, you do need to educate yourself, but you don't necessarily need an agent. And that has made it a lot harder for scam agents to survive and find victims. Excuse me, I'm very hoarse today. So
Are you
there used to be a ton of agent scams, but now they're actually pretty rare.
the one thing that makes me nervous are the writing conference scams, or if they're not even know if they're scams, but writing conferences, or you come to the this, that, and the other thing and sit in a seminar or something along those lines. That just seems to be a money suck.
Yeah, and the webinars that you can that people are always pushing online. Yeah, that's an area where you definitely have to do research and figure out who the sponsoring organization is, and whether the people who are going to be teaching actually have any credentials. I mean, there are good events of this type, but again, you just really have to do your research.
That's the thing.
And I should say, whenever a writer encounters something that they're not sure about or they think is a little suspicious, they can always write to me at WriterBeware, and I've probably heard about it. Because
Yeah,
I get a lot of, I have a huge correspondence with people who ask me about things or want to file complaints about bad actors. So I can usually tell you something if you write to me.
is there any place else that you would recommend people, and besides yourself, obviously you being an expert, but is there anywhere else people can go to kind of be protected, or feel like they're being looked out after as writers or
Um,
artists?
WriterBeware is the only resource that is totally dedicated to warning writers about schemes and scams. So there's nobody else like us, but there's a lot of really good information online. There are agents' blogs, there are authors who are really savvy. Joanna Penn, for instance, is a great resource for publishers and all about self-publishing. WriterBeware website, which is WriterBeware, separate from the blog. I have a self-publishing page that has a whole list of great resources for self-publishers to look at for information on indie publishing and warnings about scams. So, there are a lot of great resources out there.
And I want to point out that you've also been awarded by the Science Fiction Writers of America for your work on this exact topic as well. Did you receive
Yes,
the service?
yes,
Yeah.
I was very honored to receive the Service to SFWA Award. Yeah, SFWA has been incredibly supportive of this work that I do. And it's made it possible for me and the other people involved in WriterBeware to do it without being, silenced by people who want to shut us up. And there are people, we've been sued. I get threats on a semi-regular basis. But because I have the backing of a professional writers group, I can feel more confident in standing my ground and saying, no, I'm going to take that blog post down.
That's horrible. You've been threatened with physical violence
Yeah.
and being sued for telling people to be careful about where they spend their money. That's disgusting.
I've gotten death threats. There was once a whole website dedicated to discrediting me. People have posted fake reviews on my books. I take it in stride.
So I noticed that you actually don't have any of your work on Amazon.com right now either.
No, I do.
Oh, you do? I
Yeah,
was like
all my
clicking on
books
links.
are on Amazon.
Um, I was trying to, see what your author profile looks like there, and I could not pick up or find any of your Amazon links.
Oh, really? Well, if you go to my website, which is
Oh, you know what? Now
victoriastrauss.com,
it's working. It might have just been my internet. I apologize. No, it's fine.
no problem.
I'm looking at Passion Blue right now, and it worked. It didn't work before a second ago, but now it's working fine. But Amazon's self-publishing through their service with the create content type situation. Are you familiar with that and how it works in terms of
Create
getting people out
space,
there?
sure.
Yeah, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm actually published. My last two books were published by Amazon's traditional publishing division.
Oh,
Um,
what's that? I've never heard of it before.
Amazon Publishing. It's really basically just like a traditional publisher, only it's Amazon. And the one real limitation is they only publish the ebooks in Kindle format. So
No paper books from them.
no paper books, but the ebooks are only Kindle. So if you can't, for instance, be on iTunes or on Barnes and Noble
Oh,
because
I see.
they use EPUB format, and Amazon has its own proprietary format for
I think it's
Kindle.
a Mobi or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that's fascinating. And you're still writing right now, and you're going to be publishing you're going to republish your old stuff independently.
Yes. Yes, I'm going to use CreateSpace, probably use CreateSpace and Ingram's Spark.
What
Uh,
are you still working on new stuff as well?
I am. I've had some upheavals in my life lately, so it's been kind of a long hiatus for me. But I am working on some new stuff, and I'm hoping to be able to put out some original work in the near future.
Do you still write short fiction?
I've never been too good at short stories. I think some people are either novelists or short story writers. I tend to write long.
Again,
But
nip it in the bud, huh?
yeah, I've been trying to write short stories because I think it's a good discipline for me. I tend to be a long-winded writer, and it's a good discipline for me to write in a shorter format. So what I am hoping that I'll be able to do is to publish a collection of short stories. So that's probably what will be my next new work.
Do you know what genre are you working in?
Um, Fantasy, slipstream, kind
Flipstream.
of on the
That's a
border between fantasy, historical, and contemporary. I kind of like to flip between genres, but it's always got a speculative
element to it,
element.
yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's me. I like my speculative writing. I started out in literary fiction, but I'm totally writing about the same thing. I love historical fiction too.
Mm-hmm.
What era do you like to work with?
Well, my first book was historical fiction. It was set in the Middle Ages. And my two most recent books, Passion Blue and Color Song, are set in Renaissance Italy.
Oh,
So I love that period. That's such a rich period to write about.
what draws you to it?
Um, I think the art mostly. The Passion Blue and Color Song are both books about a painter, and I love the art of that period. I think that's what really drew me to it. I wanted to write about artists, and for me, the Renaissance art is some of the most beautiful.
It's interesting. They were so corrupt during that time frame too. I mean,
Oh
with the Catholic
yeah.
Church and the what do you call it, the banking institutes and all that good stuff that has sprung up at that time. And God, it's so much interesting stuff. Um,
hmm
what is it? I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He painted Cervantes. Is that who I'm thinking about? Cervantes. Let me just mess this up completely. My brain does not work this late at night, sir.
I know that. I know the feeling.
I'm the more
Right about the corruption, and
yeah.
especially in the
And the
church.
violence, right? And the disease, and everybody's dying and having sex with each other, and like the Catholic Church is so like in it, and it's like, man, I love the era completely. When I was in college, I was in a Jacobean tragedy written by John Ford, maybe, I don't know, but man, it was like
I love.
'Tis pity she
I
was a
love
whore.
classic theater.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
yes.
As totally, the brother and sister are getting it on, and the church is involved, and there's murder and mayhem. And it's like, man, this is the best stuff ever. Try to put this on TV nowadays.
Yes,
I guess
yeah.
they do with Game of Thrones. It's kind of like a Jacobean tragedy, isn't it?
It is with everybody dying, and yeah, but history, those eras were extremely bloody and
Yeah. And
violent.
as they had to get up close and
And
personal too. There wasn't anybody shooting, from a field, a field away. It was like you have to get up right next to them and stab them and look in their eye as they're dying. I mean, it's just a
or
brutal life.
poison them, which
Yeah, that's true
was
too.
not Lucretia Borgia. She was a poisoner. But it's interesting because that's a way in which historical fiction is similar to fantasy, writing fantasy, because they're alien worlds which you can't directly experience. You can read about them in research, but you have to fill in with a lot of imagination.
Hmm.
So to me, that's sort of the borderline between history and fantasy.
It's very interesting too because you can write a fantastical, you can write fantastical elements to the historical fiction too. Because back then they thought everything was derived from God. All the power and science was given to them by God. Things had a
Mhm.
mystical bent to them. You know what I mean? They gave spirits and fairies and whatnot credit for a lot of stuff. And
Yeah, and astrology and magic, and yeah, absolutely.
I mean, how
Yeah.
would you classify that? I mean, obviously, if you write about, the Borgias during the Italian Renaissance, you're writing about historical people who believed mythological things, right? Are you still going to call it historical fiction, or can you call it fantasy if they
Um,
give credit to the
I would
scribes?
say historical fiction with a fantastic element. I mean, it depends. You can be more historical or more fantastical. I mean, I'm trying to think of, and my brain is not working either. But there's, I and I can't. Oh, Susanna Clark, the book by Susanna Clark. Um, that book it's set in it has a historical frame, but it's primarily fantasy. But it works within its historical frame. But there's a very heavy something in Mr. Norrell. That's the name of the book. And of course I can't think of the full name. But
Mr. Norrell,
my
Jonathan
two books,
Strange and Mr. Norrell.
yeah, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Yes, it's got a solid historical setting, but it's got many fantastical elements. So it kind of is more fantasy, I would say. But then my to go back to my own book, Color Song, it has a fantasy element, but it's primarily a historical novel.
It's a great title,
So
Color Song. What era? That's Renaissance Italy.
that's Renaissance Italy, and it's all about painting and color and art. So
One of my favorite books ever is Vonnegut's Bluebeard. Have you read that?
I haven't read that. No.
It follows an artist through his experiences in World War II. Obviously, Vonnegut struggled with his experiences and the European front and being a POW and all that his entire life. So this is another book that kind of follows that train of thought, where his character is a veteran of World War II, and he's an artist as well. And he, throughout the entire novel, talks about this painting that he's developing. And at the end of the novel, they finally reveal it, and it's words, but it's so moving the way he described this painting. I felt like I could see it. You know what I mean? Painting
Mhm.
is so, it's emotional.
It is. It is.
That's why I love your title so much, Color Song. It's really a great way to express that.
Oh, thank you.
So it's out soon, or you're republishing it, Color Song?
Those two books are out and in print, quote unquote, because in print doesn't mean what it used to. They're currently published and available for sale. I have an earlier fantasy duology that has been kind of unavailable for a number of years, and that's what I'm going to be republishing. The books are called The Arm of the Stone and The Garden of the Stone.
And
And
they're
those
fan.
they're fantasy. I guess you'd say epic fantasy, because they take place in an entirely invented world, and they involve magic and betrayal and corruption and all that stuff. All the good stuff.
All the good stuff. Yeah, exactly. Stuff that we're dealing with in present day world that we live in now too, unfortunately.
No kidding. No kidding.
That's like part of being human, I guess. Trying to corrupt each other into believing the way that we want them to believe.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's human nature.
Hmm. So I guess starting out this conversation, you said that the publishing world has changed from when you started in 1982 to today. Um,
Mhm.
do you find yourself floundering in the sea of publishing possibilities nowadays, or because of your experience, is it easier for you to say, I'm a writer and this is how I get paid?
Um, well, I struggle with self-doubt, so it's never been easy for me to say I'm a writer. I suffer from imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of us do.
Yeah.
Um, but I think because of Writer Beware, I have kept very current with publishing and what's happening in publishing and around publishing. So I think I have, at this point in my life, a fairly firm idea of what I will and won't put up with. Um, and I am not sure that I will. All of my books have been published by big publishing houses, and I'm not sure that I ever want to go that route again. Um, I might try and work with a smaller press, a smaller independent press, or I might, for this collection that I'm thinking about, probably I will self-publish that because, unless you have a reputation as a short story writer, it's pretty tough to sell collections.
It's pretty tough to
But
sell
I, but
anything.
I, but I think publishing has changed so much, and it's so much easier for a smaller author like myself to get lost in a big setting, like at a major publishing house, which has more or less been my experience with all my books. And I think that I would either like to play on a smaller stage or be the one in control. So, in some ways, I regret how much things have, because it's a lot harder now to be an author than it used to be.
I guess,
A
looking at it
lot
though, isn't it?
harder.
You could call yourself an author in 1982 and know that your book is getting published. Somebody picked it and said, you know what, we're going to give you money for this, and we're going to not only give you money, but we're going to put money behind it. and get it out there for the world to buy. Now you call yourself a writer, and that might not happen. Do you have that? You
Yeah.
have the imposter syndrome happening, like you said earlier, where you have to, your personality is begging for you to validate it, and it's not going to stop, right? I mean, you're always going to hold that desire to write the next thing that'll possibly get you some validation.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like that
Yeah,
out there.
that's very true.
And you
It's
talk
it's
about a big publisher swallowing you up. I mean, it's like the independent publishing world is gigantic, right? I mean, just
it is, and it's it's filled with, I mean, this will probably get me in trouble, but it's filled with crap.
no. I mean, I agree, because everybody can
Um,
publish.
and they're
There's no way to filter it. I mean, I can publish, somebody else can publish, and
right.
they can all call themselves writers, and it diminishes the definition of writer in a way.
I don't think it's that so much as that it makes it so much more difficult to break through, because it's like just this it's huge. It's a huge market. There's so many people in it. Many people wanting the same thing. Many people, probably shouldn't be publishing anything or aren't ready to publish anything. And one of the things that the crowdedness of the market has done is it's transformed the job of indie author into something much more like an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
Um, you really have to be ready to run a business. You have to be professional. And you have to spend money. I mean, when the indie publishing world first opened out, it was like, well, anybody can get published for free, and or for very little money. But now, because there's so much competition, in order to stand out, you really have to invest in yourself in a like way. So, and you do. There are no guarantees. That's true. That's true in the traditional publishing world also.
Well, that's always been true in the traditional publishing world, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you always had to stick out with quality and working hard and being the best and being able to market yourself. I mean, one of the best things about a Stephen King is that he can read his own books on an audio tape and go be on David Letterman or The Tonight Show and be entertaining or mysterious, or put his movies on film, because he's able to network in that way. I mean, he's able to do the parts of his job because he's good at those parts. He had to work
Well,
his
and
butt off.
he has the money to hire the best people. But you have to wonder, in the indie publishing world that's crowded, the traditional publishing world is crowded. There's so many more books being published now than, before the turn of the century. And I often wonder, mega writers like Stephen King, if he were to start writing now, what would happen to him? Would
Be
he
swallowed
break
up.
through,
Would he do it? Yeah.
or would he be lost in the obscurity? Because you can be really, really good and just not break through. It's a brutal business. It really is. And you have to love the doing of it. You have to love the writing, and the writing has to be its own reward, because the professional rewards just may not come. I know
Yeah,
that
that's
sounds
the
awfully gloomy. I apologize.
well, it's true though. I mean, there are some it's a my wife calls it, lightning in a bottle. You don't know what's going to strike. You don't know what it's going to happen. I mean, it could happen, it couldn't happen. But if you don't have your hand on the car when it does, it's definitely not going to happen for you. So again, going back to that imposter syndrome, you have to convince yourself that it's going to happen with every word that you put in the word processor. Because if it
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
now, it might later.
You have to hold on to the hope. And I think every writer goes through periods of despair and discouragement and all of that, but you have to be able to kind of pull yourself up and go forward anyway. You know, the same in any creative profession.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there are tons of actors out there being nothing more than being a barista, or waiting tables, or something even more humiliating.
Yeah.
Any art field, artist. I mean, man, Picasso, not Picasso. Who am I thinking about? Rembrandt? No, not even Rembrandt. What's the guy's name? Starry Night.
Oh, Van
Van
Gogh.
Gogh. I
Yes,
mean,
it
the
was
guy was penniless, right? I mean, he was
in his whole life. Yeah.
penniless, living
Yeah.
off his brother's income. I mean, that dude sliced his ear off. He was marrying prostitutes all over the place. I mean,
Yeah.
one of
And
my favorite artists.
people thought his work was awful. People hated his work.
And now I couldn't even
Yeah.
imagine a world where there was no Van Gogh, right? I mean, can you imagine a world where Starry Night doesn't exist, or this
Yeah, but I'm
art
also
field
I'm
where?
also sure that Van Gogh would rather have been famous in his lifetime. You know, I mean, there are artists like that who almost merit is unrecognized after they die. I'm sure they would have rather had recognition when they could enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't. It's just the world of creation and entertainment is a fascinating pursuit. It really, honestly is. I mean, you said that the in publishing world has changed. At one point, it was the wild, wild west, and now, basically everything is populated. The world doesn't have huge, the world of independent publishing doesn't have huge swaths of land that are open for, people to move in and call it a home. What do you think the next stage is for us? I mean, things are getting overcrowded. Is there a new world out there that we could sail to and pitch our tents and call it our own and make, a living with it?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not good at prognosticating. I confess that, back in the early 2000s, I was one of those people who thought that it would never develop. It would always be kind of a side alley. Changed. Amazon changed everything with the Kindle.
Yeah, we know people
If
can
not
make
for,
millions of dollars with independent publishing too. I mean, Howie, it lives on a catamaran touring the world, and he makes.
yes, but his mill is so publishing and traditional publishing rights deal. So yeah, he came out of indie publishing and he's exploited it in a very key way, but he benefits from both worlds. But I think that's the I mean, if there was something to which I could aspire, if I had the energy, that would be what I would aspire to have a foot in both worlds,
Yeah, he
to
has electronic
control.
downloads, and the traditional publishing has
Mhm.
the paper. So I mean, he has,
Yes.
the support on both sides.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I'm a huge fan, and give him a lot of credit. He did it on his own.
Now,
Um,
when you look at somebody like a Howie, do you think it's luck? Do you think it's perseverance? Do you think it's intelligence? Do you think it's
oh, it's
summing up
good
with a?
writing. It's all of those. So it's serendipitous in a way. I mean, you've got to be good or marketable. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to make the right decisions. But luck and happenstance, I think, is a big part of any writer's success,
Yeah.
and that's this really can't be predicted. He's an example of kind of an organic success because he just put a story on Amazon and people loved it.
Yeah.
There aren't too many stories like that. There aren't too
Nope.
many. It doesn't happen like that very often.
Andy
Um,
Weir is another one that has that kind of origin story. He
yeah,
did The Egg. Barely has 800 words to it, and it's been translated into 25 different languages and developed a community around him. And he was able to write The Martian with the assistance of his community, basically, guiding him along, saying you should do this, that, and the other thing. And now he's
yeah,
got a
yeah,
major movie with a major director, and he's just written his second novel. And I'm a big, big fan of that dude.
yeah, and he, it's really interesting the way he leveraged his community. I mean, I couldn't work like that, but, The Martian is a great book.
Yeah,
I
it was
really enjoyed
fantastic.
it.
It really,
I like
really
the
was
movie
good. Have you
too.
had an opportunity to pick up Artemis yet?
I read some of the reviews.
Or they say bad things?
They're pretty bad. Yes.
Are they?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I thought the world building was fantastic. I really did. I thought it was great. I
Yeah.
mean, I could see how the reviews would be bad because I mean, he didn't really have a great plot, but man, his world was just amazing. It's really,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
good.
I'll definitely read it, but my enthusiasm is just a little bit dampened. I mean, but reviews are reviews. They don't always get it right. So.
It's not, I don't even listen. I don't judge books by reviews. I judge it by, word of mouth. If I'm hearing about this book that I have to read, I'm gonna have to read it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Or if it's just an interesting situation, like, an astronaut's biography. I mean, I can't stand not reading one of those books. I love them so much. Endeavor, Scott Kelly's book,
Oh
just
yeah, I want to read that. That's on my list.
fascinating read. I just love the idea of these superhumans going up to space and doing that thing that I know I could never do. Not even if they
Hmm.
gave me permission and say, "Hey, would you like to go up to space?" I would not be able to accomplish that task. I would die. Man, Victoria, I really enjoyed this conversation. We're just about at an hour. Was there anything else that you wanted to add before we sum it up?
No, not really. I just suggest that writers check out Writer Beware. Website is writerbeware.com, and there's a link there to the blog. And if you ever encounter anything that's vicious or have a bad experience with a publisher or whatever, to me, my email address is aware@sfw.org.
SFW.org. Okay. And I like to finish up these podcasts with three questions. The first one being obviously you've put a considerable amount of effort into your writing career, and um, what would you say? What would be a line of inspiration that you could provide somebody that's struggling to achieve some kind of success in their creative life?
Um, I would say there are no rules, even if people
Mhm.
tell you there are. Do what's right for you, which may take some experimenting, but don't do anything because someone else told you it was right. Do what's right for you.
I love that. There are no rules. There really are no rules. You could find an infinite number of definitions that correlate to success, can't you?
Yep.
They don't all follow the same path. That's really beautiful. The second question is, what are you reading? Do you have anything interesting on your nightstand or in your Kindle right now that you want to share?
Yes, I am reading a book called Collusion. Um, I can't remember the author's name is something, and I can't remember the author's name, which is terrible. But it's about and Russia and the infamous thing.
Um,
Really, I don't usually,
is it
by the way, I don't usually read nonfiction, but it's a very interesting book.
is it Collusion by Luke Harding?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
Collusion by Luke Harding.
I mean, how can you not be interested in that right now? I mean, it's such a yes, I was gonna say fascinating, but honestly, it's really
Yes,
scary. It's just absolutely terrifying.
it is, and it's very interesting to read this book, which was published, I think, several months ago, in light of the reporting that has happened since. It just goes to bolster everything that he says in the book.
I just don't even
Yeah.
know what we're gonna do as a country going forward. It seems like this is unrecoverable. It definitely puts a little asterisk on the definition of what being a United States citizen is. I think I don't know.
Yes,
I don't know. I
I know,
really
I know. It's very tempting to despair, but our democratic institutions are strong. I think we'll recover, but I hope.
I mean, not to turn this into a
I
political
mean,
podcast or anything, but at the same time, when you say it's strong, I think about all of those people in Washington that sit in the Senate and the Congress. Just they're all so corrupt. It seems like they're just money grubbing, and they want the biggest lobbyist paycheck, and they're there forever, and their voices are so stunted by greed and just
and
I don't know.
ideology. It's ideology over people. It's all
Yeah,
about
that's a great way to look
ideology.
at it. Really, it
Yeah.
is ideology over people. I recently read that NASA, instead of picking the best place to have their headquarters, are spread out all across the country, where now they have to send something from Virginia to Houston or like Wisconsin to Houston just so they can get a spaceship into space. And that's all because of political, maneuvering, and this
Hmm.
senator needs something there because, they're going to pork barrel that or whatever. It just makes me ill. We could be doing so much more with what we have, and we're not doing barely anything. Sad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And now they're talking about bringing back earmarks.
What
Uh,
was that?
they're talking about bringing back earmarks, which is kind of the pork barrel
Yeah,
stuff.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It just makes me sick, and I don't see it changing, and that's the sad part. And I can't run for office. I don't have any money or backing, and I don't know, maybe you do, but it seems like a normal person doesn't, and I don't know.
yeah. Well,
It's
a lot of people are stepping up, though. It's kind of encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? We don't know what tomorrow is going to lead to. It's like the cusp of a plane door. You're up there trying to skydive. You don't know what's going to happen once you jump out, but you're forced to because that's what you went up into the plane for to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, the third question kind of already answered that a little bit, but where can we find you on the World Wide Web? And you did say aware at
At
SF
writerbeware.com.
writerbeware.com. That's your website.
Writerbeware.com. That's the website, and there's a link on there to the blog. The
And
website is up. The website is a general information resource. It's got sections on a bunch of different scams and editors, publishers, agents, and it's regularly updated, but it doesn't change a lot. The blog is where I cover scams in real time. And there's a link to the blog on the website. And my email address is there at SFW as in William A.org.
excellent. All right, Victoria, again, thank you so much. It was really great for you to come on tonight and talk with me.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.